Ladies and gentlemen, our next event of the evening is a one-fall match with a 60-minute time limit.
What I'd like to have right now,
where the big boys play.
This is where the big boys play, huh?
This is where the big boys play.
Hi everyone, you're listening to Where the Big Boys Play, and I'm here with Chad. How are you doing, Chad?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today, Parv?
Fantastic, and you've been watching like 9 hours of football, is that right?
Well, yeah, the games start at 1 o'clock, and so from 1 o'clock till right now it's about 5:55 local time for me. I've been watching about 12 football games on my NFL Sunday ticket. Just been flipping through the games, so an enjoyable day so far.
So, what does your wife do when you're just watching football all this time?
She actually, now my wife actually watches NFL football.
Oh,
that's the one sport that I've really gotten her to come on board with, and I'm including pro wrestling as a sport, but I guess overall hobby. But yeah, she's a big Atlanta Falcons fan, so we watched the Atlanta Falcons game, and then once the Atlanta Falcons game ended, like today, the other games that were really close or went into overtime were just starting their overtime period, so we were able to watch those straight through too. So I am happy about that, or else I don't think I could sit on the couch for 7 hours.
Okay, so getting into we don't just me and Chad today. I think this is such a minor show that this is a pretty minor feeling show, isn't it, Chad?
Yeah, I don't think this is one you exactly want to roll out the red carpet for a guest commentator on.
But I do have a little guest contribution here from Edison Cheapy, who's on the Kayfabe Memories board, who sent me a PM just giving some a little bit of detail on some of the angles that were going on between Starcade 87 and Bunkhouse Stampede 88. So the biggest thing really that happens is that Lex Luger is kicked out of the Four Horsemen and turns face. And I believe the way he turned face is that, and this is Edison Cheapy telling us this, he says that Luger refused to eliminate himself in a Bunkhouse Stampede so J.J. Dillon could win it, and that led to him turning face and being kicked out of the Horsemen. Also, Jim Cornette sets he kind of, the Midnight Express, they're still the US champs at this point, but Cornette starts a feud with Dusty Rhodes and with Nikita Koloff, the Superpowers. I think Rhodes is the US champ at this point, and Koloff is the TV champ, and Cornette says that Lane is going to be one and Eaton's going to be the other. So we kind of get a weird kind of singles push for both Eaton and Lane during this time. Then what else happens? Larry Zbyszko has been targeting Barry Windham for the Western Heritage States title, as we will see, and the Powers of Pain, the Warlord and the Barbarian form in Paul Jones's stable. So those are the kind of the major plot points. And I also had a good look through the January '88 Wrestling Observers from to see what Meltzer was saying, and he's got a lot. He's moaning about a lot of things at this point. First of all, there's quite a few injuries. So the Rock and Roll Express are injured, and they were. I think Ricky Morton was injured taking a bad bump from a Bunkhouse Stampede. Steve Williams is injured. Mighty Wilbur was injured, and he was also injured by taking a bump from a Bunkhouse Stampede match.
That's a shame.
Have we seen Mighty Wilbur before?
I don't think so. I would have liked to have seen him in the mix of this Bunkhouse Stampede, but I guess not.
He was meant to be in it. And so was Steve Williams, and apparently they flew Steve Williams all the way over from Japan just to take part in this match. but he wasn't there, and I still haven't really found out why. Apparently, the Lex Luger term went over well with the crowd, but Meltzer has a warning. He says that they can't drop the ball here, and they've already showed signs of treating Luger as just one of the boys, just one of the guys type thing. And he says that if they do that, he'll just become the '88 version of Nikita Koloff, who was over for about 3 months, but then nobody cared after that. And I think we've seen that he's really gone from being someone who's super over to being just kind of a mid-card face at this point. He says that Crockett desperately needs a new top babyface, and it could be Luger. And he says that one of the problems with Crockett is that they do it on both the face and the heel side, is that they don't have like one or two guys who are way above the others, like Hogan is in the WWF. And he says that they need both super faces and super heels, and that basically because Flair is constantly booked with the Horseman, that there are times when he seems like just another Horseman, and he argues that it hurts him, that it makes him seem like less of a kind of super duper star.
Well, I mean, to me, that's kind of an interesting take because a couple of things from that. One, I mean, Flair certainly is not a dominant monster heel, but that's been his gimmick. I mean, ever since he's been a heel, that's what he's been. So I don't think if in late 1987, early 1988, he just started bulldozing through people. Yeah. I don't know if that had been successful either. And the fact of them not having a Hulk Hogan superstar, I would kind of argue that they sort of did, and that would be the winner of the Bunkhouse Stampede tonight. He sort of seems to be booked as the Hulk Hogan type person for NWA to me.
You got to remember that in January 1988, Dusty Rhodes is more or less Satan in Meltzer's mind. He's really down on Dusty.
Yeah.
I'll come on to this a little bit later.
Well, as we get through the show, I mean, I don't think that was... I just don't think those, looking at the flaws of the company right now, one, I would argue that they do have a pretty superhero type baby face. He may not look like a superhero, he obviously doesn't, but he certainly books himself in that regard, and, you know, I think as this show will see, that's not always very successful.
Part of the big news, that one really big piece of news that happens at this point is that Titan, that is WWF, if you ever read the old Wrestling Observers, Meltzer always calls WWF Titan. They've poached Big Bubba, and he says that, and this is interesting because we were talking about this a while back. Do you remember when I had that thread on PWO where I was talking about short-term contracts? And everybody just piled in and said, well, you know, the guys didn't have written contracts at this time. But Meltzer seems to think that Big Bubba is one of the few guys at JCP at that kind of level who wasn't on a guaranteed set salary. So that in January '88, most of the top tier talent in NWA had written contracts with a guaranteed downside. So maybe they just started coming in at this point. And apparently Bubba didn't have this, so Vince just swooped in and signed him. And there was nothing, like, he said there could be a legal wrangling because he was contracted, I think, until the end of the year, but because he wasn't guaranteed any money on it in a court of law or something, you probably know better than me as the accountant. I mean, if you have a contract that doesn't guarantee payment, can somebody just come in and offer you an...
that'd be more expertise as a lawyer. I deal with bean counting, Parv. It's anything with money. But I'm sure there's probably some very logistics type law with the wording of the contracts that probably allowed, I don't know if Jerry McDivitt was the legal counsel at this time for Titan, but probably allowed them to kind of circumvent whatever contract he had and swoop Bubba up.
Yeah. But this was a long time before you were babysitting for him, right?
That was, this was, that was probably, I guess I was 15 or 16. It was me and my girlfriend. It was only one time, so sad times. I'd like to have been Big Boss Man's permanent babysitter. That would have been a cool little anecdote. But yeah, just a short one-time experience there.
Imagine you kept on babysitting for him, and like you went in the kind of little boss man gimmick there. You went kind of dressed up as a little boss man.
It had been like in Lucha Libre, I could have been like his meanie. You know, they have the Big Boss Man, and then I could have been the meanie Big Boss Man, which is actually kind of humorous because probably facially and body-wise, I do look like a smaller Big Boss Man. That'd probably be the wrestler I look the most alike.
Really? Okay. I've now got a mental image of Ray Trailer.
There you go.
So there are hints towards Wyndham becoming a fourth horseman, but then a couple of letters later he says forget that because Wyndham and Lex Luger shook hands. So Cornette is now managing Dick Murdoch, and Meltzer's all over this run of Murdoch in early '88. He says that he has a match of the year candidate with Nikita Koloff around this point, which I've never heard of. Have you heard of?
No, that'd be interesting to see. Okay,
I might. He hypes it pretty large there, and he says it's remarkable that Murdoch could drag a good match out of Koloff at this point. He says that the NWA TV rating slide is over and it's now rebounding. So about 5 months before this, they had a 7.9 rating, but now but that dipped to about a 4 just before Starrcade, but now they're back to a 5.6. And just to give you a basis of comparison, Titan at the same point were getting a 9.9 on 222 stations across the United States. 222 stations. I guess they're all those local channels carrying syndicated TV, is that right? I've never really understood how that works.
I don't know how the ratings would work or how they would. I guess I don't really. I mean, to me, that seems like a lot more data back in those times because I know now if you're a Nielsen person, you get a little box which you hook it up to your TV or whatever, and then electronically it sends, lets the people at Nielsen know what you were watching at that time. But I don't know how back in those times before computers or what type of system they were using to gather that data. And then also back in that time, I'm sure there was a lot, well, especially with wrestling, you had a lot more localized territories and different time slots. So, I mean, for instance, Georgia Championship Wrestling, in the early 80s would have been a prime time slot here in Georgia, but I don't know where it was syndicated, but it could be airing 2, 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that somewhere else. So I don't really know what you could really gauge as a basis of that.
Yeah, I've never understood why it's so complicated. I mean, here in the UK, they just say, oh, well, 20 million people watch the show, 8 million people watch this show. But they never seem to, there's always these obscure rating systems. And is that to mask how many people there really are? Is it like deliberately obscure, I wonder?
Well, I think now the way they do the ratings now is it's mostly it seems like it's almost from the advertiser's point of view, so that's how they're presented. For instance, the 18 to 49 age group is the highest advertising age group. That's who the advertisers want to market towards the most. So, a show that does fairly terribly in overall ratings, for instance, like a show on NBC, some of their sitcoms, they do pretty dreadful in overall ratings where they'll have, maybe 4.2 million viewers. But they do the rating for the 18 to 49 demographic, and it'll be a 2.1, which is just basically a share percentage. And that, but then like on CBS, which is a network here in the States that skews towards a lot older viewer, you'll have a show that has 12 million viewers, so that's triple the actual viewership of the NBC show, but it does the same 18 to 49 rating. So, I mean, it is a complicated system. I kind of wish it would just be a cut and dry, this is how many people watched it. But, I mean, honestly, shows don't live and die off those numbers in the States. It has a lot more to do with the 18 to 49 demographics. And then now, as we're getting into DVRs and stuff like that, online streaming, there's a lot of even more complicated metrics being used where you're looking at stuff like a rating called viewership plus 7, which means in the 7 days after the rating, after the first airing of the show, how many people watched it on DVR or on online streaming, and then it's basically a convoluted mess because even WWE that now they'll tout like their social network score or whatever, which is, you know, what the hell does that mean in the long scheme of things? Who's talking about it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's very difficult to work out exactly what's going on. He does tell us that Survivor Series did a 7% rating. So I think 7% of the total potential homes who could have bought it. But that Starcade only did a 3.3, which was 20,000 of a potential 600,000 homes got Starcade. So that's pretty crap, isn't it? That's not very good, is it?
I would not think so, no. Doesn't sound like a very good rating. But again, I mean, I don't know. I mean, because it's kind of unfair. I don't know how the pay-per-view system worked here. So even I don't know if that rating takes into effect where, you know, if I had a pay-per-view box at that time, whether even Starcade was offered, you know, because Vince strongholded some to offer Survivor Series only. So I think all of these numbers, I mean, I'm sure somebody could explain the context, but I just don't know because it's such it's a whole different world in that regard now.
So, one of the things that Meltzer keeps talking about in his ongoing rants about NWA is he's saying that they really need some new talent. And that he basically says it's ridiculous that the top heel, Flair, is more popular than any face in the promotion. Of course, he has this idea that Dusty Rhodes is never cheered but always booed. He says that Rhodes basically should turn heel and feud with the Road Warriors. So that's Meltzer's big idea for saving the Crockett in early '88, Dusty versus Road Warriors feud. He says that not only have JCP lost Big Bubba, but they also lost Terry Taylor to Vince, again just through, you know, forgetting that he was there and not really doing much with him, and also that the Rock and Roll Express have basically quit. They basically quit on the night of Bunkhouse Stampede because they were unhappy with their push apparently, and indeed I think they go to AWA after this, right?
Yeah, they go for their. I would say I don't know if it's necessarily the main problem would be the poaching talent. I would say maybe the talent they didn't give. I've got two examples. I think these two guys would have been great assets to the NWA, and that would have been Ted DiBiase. Yeah. We touched on that a little bit in a previous show where he jumped to WWF, and then the other guy is Curt Hennig, which I'm kind of surprised they didn't make a run for him when he was available, because to me he would have been, from what I've seen of him as a babyface, he really would have been that shot in the arm babyface that I can say that they do need. You know, you could have him and Sting as kind of an up-and-comer superstar. To me, that'd be two guys coming together in 1988, and even Luger rising. That would give you three guys that you could alternate with, and that'd be a pretty good trio
And the other guy they let go, don't forget, is Rick Rude.
Rick Rude also, yes. I wonder with Rude if they just didn't see the potential.
Yeah, well,
he never really. Rude's really a type of guy that it doesn't seem like he flourished or did much until he, at least personality-wise, until he landed in the WWF.
I have to say that even early Rude in WF, like Rude around this time, is pretty shitty, actually. It's only like 89, 90, where he really, like, when he's during the Warrior feud, I think he has a feud with Jake as well. It's only kind of during that time that he really kind of comes out as a big star. But there's nothing to say that couldn't have happened in Crockett Land.
Sure.
Yeah, and the thing about DiBiase is that how would they have used him? He would have to be a babyface, right? Or turn.
I would have thought he would have. Yeah, I would think that him coming in as a babyface would have been smart. I mean, the only other thing that I could think of, if you wanted to go this way, would have been, maybe the Horseman turn on Flair, turning him face, and then you have DiBiase become the leader of the New Horseman, maybe something like that. I could see something maybe in that regard working.
Can you imagine the DiBiase, Tully, Arn, and say Barry Windham? That would have been a cool stable, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that'd have been an awesome stable. That's why I think I think even obviously they wouldn't go all the way with a full cartoon of the $1 Million Man, but just sort of the way he presented himself, even in Watts' territory in the '80s when he was a heel. I mean, that sort of heel would have definitely worked, I think, in the NWA at this time.
That was actually one of the things that surprised me most about the Watts stuff, is how much of DiBiase's $1 Million Man character was already there.
Yeah, I mean, you're essentially just, in a lot of ways, it's just you're making more vignettes and putting on a suit with a $ sign on the back of it.
Yeah. And Virgil, don't forget how important Virgil is.
Yeah, Virgil also, yep, absolutely.
Well, one of the things that Meltzer picks up on is the amount of talent from the UWF that they just weren't using. Then he mentions Sean Royal, Chris Champion, Eddie Gilbert, and recently passed away Brad Armstrong, rest in peace. He said that all of those were very underutilized, and that they basically disappeared from TV around this time. What was the reason for that when it was the same old guys week after week? One of the things he says is that no matter how great a talent somebody like Tully or Arn or Flair is, when you're flying them all across the country and having 300 matches a year, they're all going to get worn out and they're going to get tired as well. Both tired physically and in terms of the fans seeing them so often. Any thoughts on that before we get on?
I mean, the guys you mentioned, to be honest, Sean Roy, I don't even know who that is. Chris Champion, I only vaguely remembered him, and then in the 1990 yearbook, he sort of comes in as a blast from a past, which you'll get to, and basically the most memorable thing about him is his ridiculous haircuts, so you'll enjoy that. And I mean, Brad Armstrong, I think, as we talked before, I view him more as an underneath type wrestler to fill out a card, which, certainly would have added some depth. I mean, they should have used him, but I don't think it was a make it or break it situation on whether they were successful or not.
What's happened to your favorite around this time? The old Boogie Woogie Man. I haven't seen him for a while.
That's what I know. I don't know where Jimmy is at, because again, in 1990, he reemerges in Memphis. So I don't know, and he is absolutely glorious. If you thought I was on the Boogie Woogie Man bandwagon before, just wait till we start talking about the 1990 yearbook. But I don't know where he was at for this, almost 3-year stretch. It seems like we haven't seen him since maybe Great American Bash '86.
It's been a while since we've seen him.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably getting a haircut from Paul Jones or something. The only other thing that I've got from Meltzer is that he's extremely critical of Dusty pushing himself, but I guess we can touch on that later. So moving on to the actual Bunkhouse Stampede itself then. Weirdly, they're in New York for this, at the Nassau Coliseum. Is that how you say it? Nassau?
Nassau, yeah.
And there was around 7,000 fans there. So that's not bad. Not bad for them, drawing 7,000 fans up in New York. They're well outside of their general stomping grounds.
Right.
The hosts are Bob Caudle and Jim Ross, so this is the first time we've seen this particular partnership. The ring announcer is Tony Schiavone. Now, I don't think that Dr. Tom Miller has left yet. I just think, I've got a funny feeling that he's just the type of guy who doesn't travel. If you remember when we were in Baltimore, Gary Capetta did that show. I reckon he just doesn't go to the Northeast, period, for whatever reason.
Yeah, well, it may be just the type of thing where the ring announcers, I mean, again, I don't know what their contract situation or what it looked like, but they may have just been sort of independent contractors and kind of had their own, I guess maybe their own territory, so to speak, where if it was in this region, you knew that Tom would be announcing. If it was in this region, GMC would announce, and so on. So I don't really know.
I've got a funny feeling, just after listening to a couple of interviews with Capetta, that Tom Miller may have actually been an employee of the Greensboro Coliseum.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, I've got a funny, like, he obviously worked for Crockett, but I've got a funny feeling that he was also kind of like, I don't know, if you go and watch another event at Greensboro, maybe Tom Miller did the announcing for that as well, you know. I don't know, I'm just speculating, but I've got a feeling that it kind of worked like that. I know that Capetta didn't work outside of the kind of Baltimore, New Jersey, he didn't work outside of that kind of little region, which is why if you watch WF shows around this kind of a little bit earlier than this, you get the Fink in some places, you get Capetta in some places. So anyway, you know, Schiavone's alright as a ring announcer. It's not terrible. First up, actually, we get a match that we didn't see, a dark match between Sting and Jimmy Garvin and the Sheepherders in a dark match. I think the Faces went over there in a DQ win. So the Sheepherders kind of a dark, is that one match kind of deal? I think they just come in for an event like this on a, you know, one.
No, they have. I know they stuck around for a little bit before they went to WWF.
Yeah.
I think they're in the I'm pretty sure they'll be in the Crockett Cup. I know they had a barbed wire cage match with the Fantastics. I think that was in the Crockett Cup, or it may be Great American Bash, one of the two. Okay. So we'll be seeing them coming up on a show.
We'll look forward to it. So the first match is Bobby Eaton versus Nikita Koloff, who is still the TV champion, for the TV championship. We get so this is interesting to see Bobby Eaton in a singles match. We get a tentative start, and Caudle and Ross basically hype this as a strength and this kind of strength and ground game of Nikita versus the speed and the high flying tactics of Bobby Eaton. So to start off with, Koloff overpowers Eaton. He basically establishes that he has a strength advantage. Eventually, Eaton gets a headlock on, but ends up getting a slam. The match still hasn't really got going at this point. The action goes to the outside, and Eaton gets posted, and then takes a arm drag on the concrete. Eaton begs off, and then he gets in some basic offense. They go back inside. We get an elbow drop from Eaton. and then Eaton gets on a hammerlock. I must admit, I'm not really feeling this match at all so far. The crowd entertains themselves with a cornet sucks chant. We get a drop kick from Eaton for 2. We get another quite boring, it must be said, hammerlock from Eaton now. Then we get a spot where Cornette shouts in Koloff's face and he says, "You're an idiot, you're a moron, you're a bald-headed goof," which was probably the most entertaining thing about this match so far. 15 minutes have gone, and Tony says, Tony tells us that 15 minutes have gone. Now to me, this hammerlock that Eaton has Nikita Koloff in looks really unpainful. I don't really understand why, because I mean, the way the hammerlock is, Koloff's got a complete arm that is just free. So why doesn't he just punch him in the face?
Elbow him, something.
Yeah, or just elbow him, or he doesn't need to just stay in that hold. Koloff powers out of it and hits the sickle, but he doesn't really catch it clean, and there's not even a pin attempt there. Eaton drops Koloff on his arm in a kind of weird arm drop move. He does more than once, which is fairly inventive, I guess. And then he goes back to the hammerlock. Now, the reason I question this is because Koloff is never, ever, ever going to submit to a move as crappy as the hammerlock. I mean, he might as well be giving him a what do you call it, a noogie? Like, it's really not very painful.
Yeah. I mean, this was a week.
And even Coddle and Ross basically say, he's never going to submit to this. We get another comeback from Koloff. Eaton hits another one of those arm drops, and then he goes back to the hammerlock. 45 seconds remain all of a sudden, and Koloff comes back now. 30 seconds. Then we get kind of 6 punches in the corner. 15 seconds. He hits the sickle, but it's a time limit draw. Koloff gets Cornette's racket, but Eaton suckers him. Stan Lane comes out, and the heels win the battle, but not the war. And basically, there's 20 minutes of my life that I'm not getting back. Chad, any thoughts?
Again, Dusty decides that on one of these signature shows we need a long Koloff map work-oriented battle, and the other two, the one in Great American Bash and the one in Starrcade, I've given a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because of the good story they told to overcome the dull action. This will not be getting that benefit of the doubt because Eaton is the challenger. So for him to be the challenger for this title defense and to waste the majority of the match in this hammerlock that surely he knows, or Cornette, being a smart manager, should know will not be successful or does not help him win the title, just seems very foolish. The action here, there's just short spurts of action mixed in with a very, very dull hammerlock. So this was a really, probably, honestly, one of the worst Bobby Eaton matches from maybe, about 1985 to 1992. I can't think of many right offhand this bad or with Bobby this unmotivated. I don't know what the deal was right here. But he didn't seem like he was willing to make the match anything more than what it was, and on its own, this was a bad match.
I'd even take a scaffold match over this. I really hated this match. Meltzer gives it -2 stars, and he says this is a candidate for the worst match of the year. And honestly, it's probably the worst match we've seen.
Well, I mean, we know. I mean, Nikita, with every show, his stock has fallen. It seems like every show that we've done the past few, he's really just continued to deteriorate. But we've seen spurts of Nikita, having decent matches, and Bobby Eaton is the type of competitor that, Nikita had some real good matches with Flair, and Bobby Eaton can work a match kind of in the Flair style. So for them to do this match is really disappointing, and both guys looked unmotivated and uninterested, and it was really bad.
I'm very surprised at that, because this is a kind of opportunity for Eaton to show what he can do as a singles wrestler, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, what you was talking about before with some of the backstory with them, kind of in some ways positioning Lane and Eaton as more single stars. I mean, who knows? But we do know that history shows that they mostly, especially Eaton, that stayed in a tag team as the Midnight Express, and Eaton was in a tag team pretty much throughout his entire career in the NWA and WCW. So, I mean, a match like this where he was put in a position might have really kind of dropped his stock in the eyes of some of the executives and bookers and whoever was in charge there, because this was a really bad performance that made him look like he really needed to be in a tag team setting to excel.
Yeah, I don't understand this match at all. I don't understand anything about it. I mean, the fact that they hype it as a high-flying versus ground game, and he spends the entire match sitting in a hammerlock, I don't understand that at all.
Yeah. And he's the challenger. I mean, that's the words. If he's the champion, you could always play up the fact that he's just trying to wait out the time limit, you know, the Lord Steven Regal special. I mean, this, as a challenger, you just would think that him as a wrestler or Cornette as this masterminded manager would have had some better strategy than what was done.
I also don't understand the idea of booking a face, a pretty dominant, strong face, in a time limit draw against a guy who's been known as a tag wrestler all this time. I mean, you know, on paper, you think that Koloff is probably going to be kicking Bob Eaton's ass, right?
Right, yeah, sure.
I mean, what happens? At the end of this match, you come out thinking, oh, right, so Nikita Koloff couldn't even beat Bobby Eaton. Do you know what I mean? If you're a fan at this point, I mean, this is a terrible result for Koloff.
Yeah, I think this was a losing situation for all parties, so.
Terrible. Okay, well, the next match is Larry Zbyszko versus Barry Windham, who is the Western Heritage States champion. I think that was an amalgamation of several titles, right?
Yeah, and not exactly the most prestigious.
Larry Zbyszko has a baby doll with him, and I'm sure I hear Jim Ross tell us that he's entering his 48th year. I was like, what? What's he on about? Because there's no way that Larry Zbyszko is 48, and I checked. Larry Zbyszko was 48 in 1999, so I don't know if I completely misheard what he was saying.
Yeah, I didn't catch that, but
and then later on he said this is his 14th year as a professional, and he set his sights on winning a title. And the title he set his sights on is this Western Heritage title. So why does Zbyszko want that basically shitty title? He's setting his sights very, very low, I think. Anyway, as we start off, Baby Doll Jaws Windham to start. I noticed she's trimmed down quite a bit since her days with Tully. She may even be a size 10 by this point. Windham gets the better of the early going. Zbyszko kind of bails and stalls. We get a nice single leg takedown by Zbyszko. And really the story of this match is this is a young lion versus a wily veteran. Zbyszko misses a drop kick and hurts his back. Ross mentions that it's very unusual for Zbyszko even to be going for a drop kick. We get a fireman carry takedown by Windham. Zbyszko's kind of being very cagey all the way kind of through this. We get an atomic drop by Windham. Zbyszko bails again. Baby Doll distracts Windham as Zbyszko sneaks back in behind. We get another single leg takedown by Zbyszko before a kind of shoving match breaks out. We get drop toe hold by Zbyszko, and then a sort of half crab move, and Windham audibly calls him a bastard. Ross and Coddle mention several times that the knee of Wyndham is injured here after he was attacked by the Four Horsemen. We get a nice power slam by Wyndham 2. He misses an elbow from the top though, and Zbyszko goes to work on the knee. It goes back and forth for a bit before a karate kick and a backbreaker from Zbyszko. We get a belly to back from Wyndham, but Zbyszko does another drop toe hold and goes back to this leg lock. We get a vertical suplex from Wyndham, and then a move that Jim Ross calls a side salto suplex. Have I got that right?
Yes.
And then a sleeper hold. Action goes back to the outside. Wyndham nails Zbyszko on the table and on the wooden steps. I don't think I've seen wooden steps before. Then Zbyszko kind of posts him. 15 minutes have gone. 15 minutes remain, Giovanni tells us. Still outside the ring, Wyndham drags Zbyszko and nails his groin on the post, which seems pretty painful. And then they go back in the ring, and Wyndham takes a big bump to the concrete outside. We get a sunset flip back in, but Zbyszko nails Wyndham for 2. We get a backslide, which Wyndham gets the better of for 2. And then we get a backdrop from Wyndham. What else happens here? They collide after kind of an Irish whip double collision spot, and both men are down. We get a gut punch from Wyndham. Zbyszko misses a knee. Then we get 6 punches in the corner, a ref bump. Wyndham pins Zbyszko, but Baby Doll comes in. Oh no, sorry, Baby Doll counts the pin, so Wyndham thinks he's won, and that's the spot that Brian was moaning about before, when Face thinks he's won. But at least it's got a rationale here that he heard the count from Baby Doll. Zbyszko has Baby Doll's stiletto shoe, and well, that gives him the win. He gets the 3, and we have a new Western Heritage States champion. Chad, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I kind of like this match a pretty good bit, actually. Larry Zbyszko is kind of the type of person I think it seems the tide's kind of turning on his reputation. I know before he got a lot of heat for being a staller and, you know, kind of not much action and whatnot, but I think now I've always sort of appreciated that, because at least I kind of like those cheap tactics, and at least when he is stalling, he's usually jawing with the fans or doing something kind of interesting, walking around the ring. I mean, him walking around the ring jawing with the fans is a lot more interesting than Bobby Eaton laying on Nikita Koloff for 8 minutes. So I'd rather prefer that. And Barry, at this point in time, was, as we said before, he was a great wrestler. So this match for the beginning kind of was middling along, but once it warmed up, I thought it turned out into a really good match with a lot of high impact moves, good bumping from Wyndham, some kind of nasty shots. The gut punch that you was talking about was a real nasty shot where you could actually see the fist kind of impose itself into the midsection. And then the finish, in the first few shows we did, we seemed to have a bunch of dumb babyface finishes where the babyface looked like a complete idiot. But at least here, I could understand the rationale that Barry thought that it was the referee, making the pinfall when it was in fact Baby Doll. He even kind of raises his hand, then looks up and points at the referee and is like, "Oh shit!" And then as soon as he turns around, he gets hammered with the shoe. So I enjoyed that finish, and Larry. As unprestigious as the Western States Heritage title was, Larry really built it up, and he looked like he just won the World Championship. So he looked pretty pleased with himself.
Yeah, and I actually thought this was a good match as well. It was a little disjointed in parts, but I thought there was some nice offense here. I like kind of a lot of the stuff Wyndham was doing. And I also thought Zbyszko's offense is interesting. It's kind of weird. Like his, all his drop toe holds and his karate kick. I mean, he's got a strange moveset, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And I think that makes this match a little bit more interesting than a lot of matches. So yeah, no, I enjoy this one.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, in the end, it does get into a little bit of your turn, my turn type wrestling, where one person will have an advantage. There wasn't, a lot of long body work in the body of the match where, somebody would be selling a leg in the finish. So it does get a little disjointed, but yeah, overall I'd say good match.
Yeah, no, I liked it. It also got quite heated, which is good. And I do appreciate Zbyszko as a kind of sneaky heel, kind of wily, a kind of psychologist, I guess.
Yeah.
So our next match is a world title match, and it's Ric Flair, world champion of course, versus Road Warrior Hawk, who actually comes out with his proper Iron Maiden music tonight.
Yes.
Did you watch the same kind of, like, mine was clearly a taken from the original live feed, I think.
Yeah, mine looked like the. I mean, I don't even know if they did a VHS release of this crap, honestly. I mean, I have no idea, but yeah, you could tell it was kind of straight from the pay-per-view where you had pauses in between the matches. They'd usually cut to Cottle and Ross in between the matches, and you'd see the competitors walk to the back, and then the next two would come out.
Here's an idea for Jim Crockett Promotions. How about giving us some promos rather than Cottle and Ross between each match? Anyway, I actually thought Bob Cottle, just on that subject, I actually thought that he seemed to be struggling. He seemed really out of touch to me. Like, all his comments were really generic during this. It's like he could have been commentating on any time, almost like you can.
Yeah.
People accuse Gorilla Monsoon of that. His cut and paste, just like he's got a few generic things that he says in every match. I felt that Cottle was a bit like that throughout this pay-per-view. Anyway, there's a nice moment when Flair comes out and he waits for a minion to sit on the rope before entering the ring, which is a nice bit of kind of dick heel arrogance at the start. And his entrance generally felt like kind of a reasonably big deal. Jim Ross is already saying things like Flair is the greatest champion of all time at this point. And actually, for all the stick that Tony Schiavone gets for his kind of, this is the greatest night in the history of our sport, Jim Ross in '88 is basically says that in every match. He was really bad at it in Starrcade '87. Thinking back, and several times during this match, he basically tries to hype it as the most danger Ric Flair's ever been in.
Yeah, even the Bunkhouse Stampede, he calls that the most dangerous match he's ever witnessed. I mean, that's something that as we go along, maybe we'll obviously see the best and worst of Tony Schiavone going through all these shows right up to the end. I've always liked Tony, I think, more than most, and I think it's kind of a little bit. I mean, sure, if he's saying this is the greatest night in the history of our sport for a random Thursday night thunder in March of 1999, that's one thing. But I think one of the jobs as the announcer is to really hype it up and to seem engaged in what they're watching. So some of his enthusiastic comments that I've seen get criticized over the years, I disagree with. Yeah. Because he's just trying to get the product over.
I think at the very end he's terrible. Like he's just given up. Like on
yeah. I mean, like 99, 2000, I'm sure will be some brutal moments. But I guess we'll see.
20-year career he had before that. I mean, he's solid. He's at least as good as most other guys at this point, I think.
Right.
Anyway, J.J. Dillon is with Ric Flair. And there's some reasonably good heel heat for Flair here as well, despite what Meltzer says. He's audibly booed by the crowd. Hawk establishes his superior strength and power to start off with. We get a reverse knife edge from Flair that has absolutely no effect at all. We get 2 gorilla presses from Hawk. Flair bails. Hawk goes after him. Hawk no-sells being rammed into the steel railing. Then we get a 1987 style low blow from Flair. We get JR says, and remember this is January '88, he calls Flair the dirtiest player in the game. So that was a kind of sequence straight out of 2004, where we get the low blow and then the dirtiest player in the game call. We get a Flair chop, a rake to the eyes, a snapmare, a knee drop, kind of standard Flair offense. Goes back to the outside, he nails Hawk into the fence. We get another Flair chop. This is a good period of Flair being on top here. We get an axe handle from the top, another snapmare, a knee drop, which is a 2 count. We get 10 minutes. 10 minutes have gone, Shivani tells us. Hawk kind of makes a semi-comeback, but misses a fist drop, and Flair targets the leg now. We get another 87 low blow, and Flair is pretty awesome when he's on top during this time period. We get a belly-to-back suplex from Flair. He wraps Hawk's leg around the steel post. We get a figure 4, which is synced in for some time, but then Hawk eventually manages to turn it over. And I've always wondered about how that's so painful for Flair when the figure 4 is reversed. How much does that hurt? Why isn't it hurting the guy?
I don't. Have you ever been in a shoot figure 4?
Well, I put my brother in a figure 4 before.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, like when I was a kid, I know we used to do all these wrestling moves and stuff, and honest to God, obviously I'm not a trained wrestler, so I don't know how it was put on, but when me and my friends used to put each other on the figure 4, that was the most painful move.
Yeah.
We never got around to trying out the reversal of it because I mean the way we put it on, I mean like Scorpion Deathlock and all those moves, you could kind of put those on and it wouldn't be in big pain or nothing. But whenever we put each other in the figure 4, it was always a painful move. So I don't know quite how the physics of the reversal. I guess maybe Hawk's leg then is applying the pressure down onto Flair's and bending it. That would have to be how it worked from a conceptual standpoint, but I don't know if it would literally hurt or not.
I think if it was shoot, I think Hawk would still be in pain. That it's putting a lot of pressure on basically the shin part of your leg, isn't it? That's the part it hurts the most, right? The kind of that may just be kind of a wrestling deal where if something's reversed, it has to be affecting the other person. So who knows? Flair goes to the top, but Hawk catches him. Hawk then clotheslines Flair and the ref, so we have a ref bump. Then he clotheslines Flair over the top rope. Where's Earl Hebner tonight then? We get a power slam from Hawk. Flair begs off. The ref is still down. We get another clothesline. Flair goes to the top rope. We get a superplex from Hawk, and he pins Flair, but there's no ref. Ross mentions that this is the longest time in the history of our sport that 2 men have faced off against each other without a ref being there. We get JJ Dillon comes in with a chair. Hawk no-sells the chair shot, but then he goes after Dillon and Flair picks up the chair and nails Hawk with it, which only gets a 2. Then we get a nice vertical suplex from Flair, which Hawk no-sells. We get 10 punches in the turnbuckle, which gets a Flair flop. Flair nails Hawk with a chair for an instant DQ, and then Flair bails. And that's the end of the match. Any thoughts?
What a pile of shit this finish was. That's my main takeaway. Flair started bleeding at some random point in this. I didn't see. I don't know if you caught what the deal was with that, but I just noticed suddenly he was bleeding. I don't know if that was every 1987 and 88 Ric Flair match had to have him blade, but that was kind of weird. But yeah, I did just praise Barry Windham for not looking like a complete buffoon in the last match. Hulk does not get that same praise here because he looks like a complete idiot, sort of raising his hands at the end of this. I don't even know if I'd call this a moral victory because he didn't even get any punishment on Flair after Flair hit the chair. But the main problem I have in this match is what the hell was Paul Ellering doing while JJ constantly came into the ring? I mean, you had JJ coming into the ring, swinging a chair, and all this other stuff, and Paul Ellering is over there helping the official and doing nothing. I mean, JJ physically gets into the ring, which, JJ is not going to be the most nimblest person in the world. He physically gets into the ring, is able to hit Hulk with the chair. Hulk feeds him off. Then Flair grabs a chair. It's like, where is Paul to stop any of this from taking place? So that drove me absolutely nuts. I thought Flair worked pretty hard in the match, but Hawk's no selling also drove me absolutely nuts, where the first chair shot affected him none, the second chair shot he goes down like a sack of bricks. I mean, it's just inconsistent on what he decides hurts him here. Yeah. So this to me was essentially a one-man show, if you call that a match.
Yeah, I also didn't like Hawk no selling the bloody shot to the railing. I mean, that's ridiculous. Like, how can you get your head rammed into a railing and that not hurt?
Yeah, you had a shot to the railing and a chair shot that he no sold, in addition to the suplex and a bunch of other chops.
So here's a little point of interest here. Meltzer gives this match 3 3/4 stars. And he says it would have been 4 stars, or maybe even 4+, except for the terrible finish. And just as a basis of comparison, he gives the Zbyszko Windham match 3 1/4. So, if you were to give ratings here, how would you go on those two?
I mean, I would say, I know this match usually, the Hulk Flair match in all the reviews I've seen has been in kind of that 3.5, 4-star territory, and it's mainly everybody just saying, this is essentially the Flair. You hear about Flair carrying a broomstick. This is, evidence of tape of him doing that because Hulk brings little to nothing to the table. I mean, I would say this match to me, I had a problem with a lot of this match. So Flair gave a good performance, which I was real high on, as you might hear in the end of show awards. Yeah. But I would say this match is probably 2.5 stars, maybe, and that's being kind of generous because the finish was completely dumb. Hulk, as a challenger, was pretty completely dumb, rendering Flair's offense as null and void for big portions of it. And, I mean, if I was given that Zbyszko Windham match, I mean, I don't think probably 3.5 stars on it. So I would have definitely the Windham and Zbyszko match ahead of this one.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't, as you may have noticed, I really don't like the Road Warriors very much. And I especially don't like Hawk. I just always think that those guys are real, like, kind of meat, muscle heads. And they're kind of guys who really think that if they beat someone in a fake wrestling match, that makes them tough. Like, I honestly think that somewhere in their minds they think that. I've always got the impression that the Road Warriors are kind of dickheads, and I don't like them. So that is something, so when you get Hawk in a match, that's automatically putting me against the match somewhat because of my general perception about him as a man. But the one positive thing I'll say about this is that I do think that in the match itself, it was shown that Flair is a better wrestler than Hawk. That Flair basically outthought and outwrestled Hawk for a good portion of this match. obviously there were some problems with Hawk no selling so blatantly at different points, and then ridiculously selling in the space of 1 or 2 minutes. But there is of the 18 minutes, Flair's probably on top for a good 50% plus of it, which is more than you'd expect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I just can't. I mean, I'm rewatching this right now, and I mean, Hawk's face and the way he acts when he gets his hand raised and he raises both his hands triumphantly in the air. I mean, what an idiot! That's all you can think as a viewer watching this.
So,
It is really. I'm getting more pissed as I watch this again.
So what happens now is they basically are setting up the cage for the main event, the Bunkhouse Stampede finals, and Ross keeps on saying that they're going to set up this cage in record time. They're going to set a new record of cage setting up. So I do like the idea that there's a record book somewhere with the time it takes to set up a cage.
Yeah, it's right next to King Kong Bundy beating Specially Delivery Jones in 9 seconds at the first WrestleMania. The same person that kept up with that kept up with the cage record.
So we get this spot now where Coddle and Ross run through the credits. So we had this once before, didn't we? Where Gordon Soder.
Yeah, I think it was our very first show, Starrcade '83.
Yeah, so they went through the credits again.
Which again, I mean, really, this 10 minutes from the Hawk Flair finish to when the Bunkhouse Stampede, maybe even to the end of the tape, because the last match, as we'll soon discuss, pissed me off too. But this drives me nuts. As a paying customer, if I had to, I mean, can we not throw to, the back with Hawk vowing revenge, Flair, acting sly that he's, ran away with the belt and disqualified himself on purpose? I mean, just give us something as a viewer besides, knowing who did the electronic graphics for this show.
No, I was looking out for Jim Riley, but he wasn't anywhere to be seen, unfortunately.
He's done got canned, I guess. And then the other thing, so you have those two things already, and then the third thing with Ross is we also get this sympathetic underdog story about Dusty Rhodes. Where, he prefaces it by saying that he's won every Bunkhouse Stampede there's been before. But then we go on how Dusty was this, he barely got into the match at a show in the Omni on January 1st. So he barely squeaked his way into the match, and the odds are against him. And just this, this was terrible.
You got to remember, he is the US champ as well. So it's like,
yeah, it's the U.S. champ. I mean, it was almost like I don't know what type of undercard wrestlers were at the point of time in NWA, but it'd been like in the WWF equivalent of Barry Horowitz. Them discussing him. That's how they presented Dusty. As this huge against the odds underdog, which as the match goes on and with the finish, it's just makes you be like, oh, what a pile.
And
just complete bullshit.
Nobody would have thought that Dusty Rhodes was the favourite going into this
match. Yeah, just...
So anyway, they're really killing time here, and we get now some slow-mo of the Zbyszko Wyndham match, which they then discuss. So we really hit this might be the worst, the most lame 10 minutes that we've sat through. Because there isn't even the novelty of the fact that they're going through the credits like there was the first time. It's like, what's going on?
Well, at least that's closed-circuited, too, so you're actually at an arena, so you could think, oh, well, maybe you went to the bathroom, went to the concessions, wherever you was watching the closed-circuited event at. But, here I would judge this, absolutely, this would have been predominantly at someone's home. So you just have to, you're basically held hostage on your couch why you get the rundown of everybody involved on the production side.
Yeah, this was some weak stuff here. Just some promos. It's not rocket science.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
So
even a gloating Zbyszko promo would have been perfect.
Well, how about, right? I mean, the WF were running Royal Rumble the same night. Okay, imagine WF had booked this show. There's just about to be a match with 8 guys competing to be the Bunkhouse Stampede champ. So have a 10-minute section where you go through each of the 8 guys who are going to tell us why they're going to win the Bunkhouse Stampede.
Absolutely, that's like another viable option, but that's not what we got.
So
terrible.
The Bunkhouse Stampede final is now, and the 8 competitors are 2-time Bunkhouse Stampede winner Dusty Rhodes, Lex Luger, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, the world champions, the world tag champions, Road Warrior Animal, Ivan Koloff, who's probably in his 50s at this point, the Warlord and the Barbarian, who are now the Powers of Pain, and Koloff, the Warlord, and the Barbarian are all part of Paul Jones's army, which is still going, believe it or not. So, if you don't know, a Bunkhouse Stampede match is basically a big cage match with 8 guys in it, and to win it, you need to eliminate the other guys over the top of the cage or through the door. And that's it. And there are no other rules. There's no ref there. It's kind of completely, it's a free-for-all. Although effectively what we have here is 5 heels and 3 faces. Jim Ross starts by saying that there's no way we're going to be able to call all of the action, and broadly for the first part of this match I agree with him. So I've just kind of noted down stuff that I notice happening, because it's really difficult. Like, there's 8 guys here all fighting each other, so it's difficult to pick out bits. Arn saves Tully from being eliminated at one point. Dusty gives Ivan Koloff some cheese grater action. Tully and Arn double team Luger. There's basically just a lot going on. The one thing I did notice is that Ivan Koloff seems to be getting beaten quite a lot. He seems to be, the guy really taking the brunt of a lot of punishment. Arn gets a bit of cheese grater action, and JR says his face, his face looked like some chopped beef or something, says JR. Dusty gets his belt off and cracks the whip, and this one of those kind of Hogan style weightlifting belts. Barbarian wraps it around his wrist to nail Dusty. It's still very kind of face versus heel here, I noticed. There's no generally the heels and the faces are keeping that divide. Dusty whips Ivan Koloff, and then Coddle actually mentions, every time I look around, Ivan Koloff has been getting a pounding, which is absolutely true. Ivan ties Dusty to the rope with a belt. Luger has a boot. I think it's Arn Anderson's boot, but then I noticed that Arn Anderson has both his boots on, so I don't know why they say it's Arn's boot. The Warlord does a very strange looking kind of reverse knife edge. It's like the Warlord has, do you remember the old 80s action figures you had?
Yeah.
Where they couldn't bend their arms. It's like the Warlord has no joints. It's like his arm is just a straight line, and he can't bend his elbows in any way. Arn is teetering on the top of the cage. Tully is attacking Ivan Koloff now, so we do get a bit of heel versus heel action. Ivan is dangling, and then he falls and is eliminated by Animal, which is a big drop to the concrete to take at his age. I was concerned for our old Russian friend there. Animal eliminates the Warlord through the door, but then he gets eliminated himself. Luger torture racks Tully. I just want to pause briefly on Animal's elimination, because it seemed to happen with very little fanfare. Am I right in thinking that Hawk was just a bigger star than Animal? He seems to be positioned as the main guy out of the two of them.
Yeah, I always, just from my childhood, I always thought as Hawk as the kind of the main guy of the team, and Animal was kind of the bruiser. You know, he'd come in first, but Hawk would come in with the more flurries and the hot tags. So I kind of always have been drawn towards Hawk as, I guess, maybe the main guy of their tag team. But yeah, Animal got eliminated, and another thing in the beginning of this match, and even as they announced Animal, they announced that he'd won the most Bunkhouse Stampedes up to this one, the finals, which I don't know why he'd have to win more than once to be in the match when Dusty only had to win one, but whatever. But when he gets eliminated, it's pretty anticlimactic. You don't hear any mention of that, or how, you know, that, oh, that was a big upset, that the person that's won the most coming into this match had been eliminated.
That's really weird. They don't make a big deal out of it at all.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I mean, by comparison again to the Royal Rumble, I mean, somebody like the Ultimate Warrior, he gets eliminated, and I know that's made a bigger deal than with Animal going out.
So we get a gourd buster by Arn on Luger, and then Arn and Tully try to eliminate Luger but fail. But then, like, for the next 5 minutes or so, they keep double teaming him. Arn is basically out, and he eliminates himself to pull Luger out as well. And then somehow Tully comes out as well, so we get a kind of triple elimination.
I still don't know how Tully, he just kind of, well, like, if you were a kid and had one of the, like, slip and slides, he basically just did like a belly flop and roll out of the ring. So that was
really weird. I didn't really understand what Arn and Tully were up to there. Then we get, so our final two is Dusty Rhodes versus the Barbarian. And we get Barbarian uses some sort of weapon, then he gives Dusty a diving headbutt from the top, and then he does another diving headbutt from the top. So, I mean, Brian must be really happy at this point, because the Barbarian's finally getting his moment in the sun here. I noticed that Dusty's looking really rough. Like, he hasn't shaven, like, he's kind of... this is obviously a dark period in Dusty Rhodes' life, I think. I don't know, like, when he turns up in WF, he doesn't look as rough as this.
Well, he had Sapphire then, so...
Barbarian tries to eliminate Dusty, and then Ross says... so Barbarian tries to eliminate Dusty Rhodes, and Jim Ross says this will catapult him to stardom if he's able to do it, which amused me. But no dice. Dusty hits an elbow. They both go up to the top of the cage. Barbarian is kind of, I don't really understand why he does it, but Barbarian blatantly just kind of climbs on top of the cage himself. And we get an elbow from Dusty, and then a bionic elbow. Barbarian takes a fall to the outside. A long way to fall for a big man, I think. And Dusty is our 3-time winner of the Bunkhouse Stampede. And basically he wins a giant boot for his efforts here. Big, giant papier-mâché boot. And $500,000. I noticed Dusty wins a lot of these money matches. So yeah, and then basically Ross and Coddle talk about how he was contemplating retirement, but came back, and against all odds he's won it. Chad. Yeah,
this as much as you can praise Dusty for coming up with some of his concepts, for instance, War Games. He cannot be free for criticism for coming up with terrible concepts like this, the Bunkhouse Stampede, because it's basically mixes in a lot of other elements from successful matches, but it just doesn't come together because here the action was way too long. This match went 26 minutes, and in a match like this, in a confined space with 8 people, it's basically just a bunch of punching, kicking, and you don't have the ebbs and flows of the War Games with somebody new coming in, or kind of interesting, neat spots that you can do with people. Everybody's in at one time, and so you get 26 minutes of punching, kicking, clobbering, and stuff like that. Dusty winning this match. I think we've been pretty light on Dusty kind of putting himself over before, because, I mean, really in a lot of the shows that we've watched, Dusty's came out, like Starrcade 84 and 85, Dusty looked pretty stupid in the way it resulted. In both of those shows, he looked dumb versus Flair. So I think we've been pretty generous in not criticizing Dusty for putting himself over, but this is by far the most gratuitous effort to put himself over we've seen. Just absolutely did not need this win as a pay-per-view main event win at all. The way they kind of presented as his last hurrah, kind of him rising from the ashes to win one more time was sad and really fell on deaf ears. So this match was pretty much a train wreck disaster that was essentially a vehicle to elevate Dusty, who didn't need it and would not have been successful with it anyway. So a very unsuccessful match and a boring match in execution on top of that.
Yeah, I pretty much hated this match. I didn't really like. It's very difficult to make out what's going on, and there was something completely. It was. I mean, obviously we knew that Dusty Rhodes was going to win, but I don't think there was any doubt, was there? Even anyone there?
Yeah, especially when, I mean, the fact that it's Dusty versus the Barbarian. I mean, give me a break. At least if the Horsemen could have convincingly thrown out Luger or some of these other members to have kind of a concept of them working together, that would have created, I think, a lot more intrigue than once them two and Luger did their little fall to the outside. It was a foregone conclusion who was going to win this, and we still had about 5 minutes of action with the Barbarian trying to throw Dusty Rhodes over the top of the cage, which was also completely asinine and stupid. And then, like you said, he does essentially climb himself up to the top of the cage and gets elbowed off of it. So this was really bad.
What do you think of this? The whole idea of being eliminated by going over the top of the cage. Clearly, a lot of guys were injured doing this.
Yeah, I wonder how successful this was on the house shows. I mean, obviously, I guess decent because they did it 4 years in a row. But I can't imagine. I mean, I don't think live this would have been very great to watch at all. But I mean, who knows? Maybe evidence suggests otherwise. Yeah, what did Meltzer rank this match? Does he have it?
Oh yeah, let me have a look. He actually gave it 3 stars.
What the fuck?
He said that he does say that everybody was booing Dusty, but then he always says that, right? It's hard to rate, but I thought all involved worked hard and did as good as they could. A good job. 3 stars. Yeah. So
that's 3 more than I would have given. So there you go.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, Chad. I really didn't like this at all. And it's interesting that I mean Dusty's in WF in '89, right? And immediately whoever was booking next year dropped it. Yeah. Is it Ole Anderson in '89?
What now?
Who's booking in '89? I think it's Ole Anderson who books in '89.
Well, Flair.
And it's interesting that with Dusty gone, they immediately dropped this concept. They immediately dropped this. If he'd still been around, he would have kept that going, right?
Yeah, we didn't have one in 1990, which would have been the first year during Bunkhouse Stampede time where Dusty was not there. So this concept was abruptly ended and never saw the light of day again.
Yeah. So is this the very last Bunkhouse Stampede?
No, they did one in '89 too, which Dusty was still in there, and I guess it was in January '89. I might look it up for the next show when the finals was, or we'll probably mention it when we get there chronologically. But Dusty won that one also, so he was the 4-time Bunkhouse Stampede winner.
Chad, that's spoilers for anyone who's listening.
Yeah, sorry to break any hearts, but Dusty won again.
So as a matter of comparison here, we've got Royal Rumble '88 happened exactly the same night, and I'll just very quickly tell you what was on that card. We had Ricky Steamboat versus Rick Rude. We had the Jumping Bomb Angels versus the Glamour Girls, who were managed by Jimmy Hart. 2 out of 3 falls for the women's tag championships. We had the Islanders versus the Young Stallions, and there was also the Royal Rumble match, which had 20 men in it that year, and it was won by Jim Duggan.
And that Royal Rumble is really dull, also. I mean, I guess. Obviously, looking at this card ahead of time, I would assume I'd have picked a Royal Rumble just based from a financial benefit. And the shows were pretty much comparable, but that Royal Rumble is no great shakes either. It's pretty boring.
Yeah, they didn't really get that formula right with the Royal Rumble for a while.
Yeah.
Let's do our end of show awards then. Match of the night.
So the slim pickings, for sure, in this category. I mean, honestly, to me, there's only one option. It's Barry Windham and Larry Zbyszko.
Yeah, that's the match I've written down here. And it's not even close in my book. That's the only actually half-decent match here. MVP.
Now, MVP, I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I'm actually going with Ric Flair. Even though I did not like that match, I thought Flair, in the Starrcade show and in this show, he's really been working hard. When he was on offense and Hawk was actually deciding to sell it, his offense looked really good. Everything he did, from the knee drops when he would kind of, I don't quite know what the technical term is, but where he dangles the leg on the rope and then comes down on the opponent's leg. Right. That looked good. His chops looked really crisp. I thought he was on his game well, and even when he was kind of running away and staying away from Hawk in the early going, he did a good job there. So he's my MVP, even though I did not like the match very much. And
amazingly, Chad, because I've started writing them down now, and I've actually gone with Flair as well.
Yeah.
So 2 for 2 here. I hate to be boring, but I do think that it is an example of a match where Flair is kind of working with a broomstick and still dragging. I'm not going to say it's a good match, but what Flair does in the match is good, and I really like his. I really like the intensity of when he's on top, and he's got a sequence of moves that he always he does the snapmare, and then he goes into the big knee drop, and I like the idea of Flair getting a bit of momentum. Like, you can see him getting cockier and cockier with each move. I like that.
Exactly.
And finally, we've got our Billy Graham Award.
Yeah, now I'll just go through my kind of thought process, and I really 100% haven't decided who I'm going to go with. To me, there's, honestly, there's 4 big candidates in this match for me for this award. There's the opening competitors, Nikita Koloff, who's somebody that, like I said during that match, he's really dropped off from a heat standpoint and from a work standpoint with every show. There's Bobby Eaton, who we talked about, really disappointed in that match. Hawk, who, as you heard during the podcast, he really annoyed me in his match. And then Dusty Rhodes in the end, I thought, just for his overall selfish nature. And I'm going to go with Dusty. As far as in the actual match, I don't think he was as bad as Hawk. But just for everything from, making Ross and them portray him as this underdog character before the match takes place, and then him putting himself over and winning this match, to me, was really, by far, like I said, the most selfish act we've seen him do. Didn't help the company as a whole, and really seemed like a terrible move.
Yeah, as I mentioned, Jim Ross did say that if Barbarian was to win that match, it would catapult him into stardom. Taking that line of thought, let's just say in a dream world that Barbarian did win that match. Do you think that would have made him a much bigger star? Do you think that would have?
I think everything would have had to have been what they did after that.
Yeah.
Which, they obviously didn't do a ton with Barbarian because he was out of the company before long. I don't think just solely winning this Bunkhouse Stampede, which did a terrible buy rate, would have catapulted him into being a big star or anything.
Yeah. Interestingly, I've got two contenders for this, and neither of them are the four guys that you mentioned.
There you go.
So I've got either the Warlord, who I think this is the first time we've seen the Warlord, right? Now it's
I can remember.
It's difficult to make out with 8 different guys in the match, but he is really shitty. There's nothing else to say about him. He is a bad worker, and he looks like he's the most inflexible man ever. Like, he looks like if you tried to bend his arm, it'd actually snap off or something. That's how kind of stiffly he moves. And the other guy, and you alluded to it earlier, is Paul Ellering. Who,
yes. Oh, now that's another good contender.
He's got to be the laziest manager, the most worthless kind of. He doesn't like. I don't understand his deal at all. So, I'm trying to decide between the two of them now.
I get one thing while you're thinking about that. I mean, from a storyline perspective, what purpose did Ellering serve for the Road Warriors? You have these two huge, muscle-headed dudes that everybody is running away from, and yet they have a manager who is significantly smaller than them. And, as we've seen constantly, it's not like he's really helping them from a strategy standpoint either, because they look like idiots more times than not.
Well, he does have a reputation as being a good talker, doesn't he, Ellering?
I guess maybe that, I guess that's true.
But then Hawk could talk. Hawk was a decent talker, so yeah, I'm not convinced they ever needed him, and I really hated it when he came in during their 92 run with the puppet. Yeah, I'm not big on Ellering. I think I'm going to, just based on the fact that it was difficult to make out exactly what Warlord was doing in that match, so he could have been having a great little mini match with Lex Luger off camera. I'm going to say Paul Ellering, just for being completely worthless manager. So yeah, there we go. So and after this we go to Clash of the Champions 1, right? And
right, which is a much kind of makes you wonder why they didn't just flip the shows, because that's a much better show than this.
Yeah. Do you think this is the worst show that we've watched?
Oh, I would have to think. Yeah, I would say so. I mean, Starrcade '84 was bad, but at least had that Ricky Steamboat Tully match.
Yeah. I
mean, no match here was as good as that. And this still was a 2-hour show too, so it's not like you're. There was 4 matches. Each match, the shortest match I think was the Barry Windham Larry Zbyszko match, which was the best match, but that was still 17 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So 4 long matches, and none of them were good. So I think this was the worst show we've seen.
If I'd bought this, if I'd gone there live, I would have felt severely shortchanged. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
All right, Chad. So, well, see you next time on Where the Big Boys Play. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see you on happier times next time.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Chad.
All right, bye.
Fans, for all of us here at WCW Center Stage, for Cowboy Bill Watts and the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, I'm Jim Ross saying good night, everybody.